Of Zinni62 Media, and as we have been talking about, we're working our way through all 32 teams, their cap, their draft, and undrafted free agent signings. And I'm going to begin with Martin Mayhew, who once again, in one of those feel old moments for me, I remember scouting him as a player. He played corner on the other side from boundary corner, mostly on the other side from Deion Sanders, who of course was, well, for obvious reasons, the primary corner. So that means that Martin Mayhew was the guy that got all the action, right? Because everyone was avoiding, Neon Deion, as they called him at the time. He had a nice little NFL career. In his career, he played in 118 games, had 618 tackles, a couple interceptions, 21 interceptions, so that's more than a couple, 5 forced fumbles, and also 2 touchdowns off of returns. After being an NFL defensive back, he found his way into personnel. He'd also worked briefly in finance, but found his way into the personnel department as an intern in 1999. Assisted in scouting. Then by 2001, he jumped over to the labor relations and legal internship for the NFL League office, became director of football administration for the XFL later, and of course, obviously they folded the original version of the XFL. Then he was hired by the Lions, became a senior director of football administration, worked for Matt Millen for about 3 years, and then when Matt Millen was fired, he went from being assistant general manager, first under Millen, then when Millen was fired in 2008, he became general manager, stayed in that role until the end of the 2015 season. Then in 2016, he joined the Giants as director of football operations, then moved from there to San Francisco as a senior personnel executive, and became eventually their vice president of player personnel. And in 2019, that position, then held that until he became the most recent general manager of the Washington Commanders. And I wish him luck. It's an organization that has a lot, there's a lot there, a lot going on. But they had a very solid draft for the most part. I'm not wild about all the picks. I think that both their second and third round picks, and I know they like Alabama players a lot, but Phidarian Mathis is a rotational player, and he can do a few things reasonably well, but I don't think he's ever going to do anything so well that it demanded being a top 50 selection. And then Brian Robinson was a top 100 selection, who I think you could have waited another round, maybe even 2 on, and I think he'll be a solid rotational running back, but it'll take some of the load, obviously, off of their main running back, which is what they're concerned about, is, giving him a little more rest, for lack of a way of putting it. And I get that. I mean, Gibson is a former wide receiver slash, running back type who's sort of a reverse Deebo Samuels. And even though he's a bigger back, he's over 220 pounds, they worry about the pounding, and I get that. But you would either come gotten Brian Robinson later or someone just as good. Percy Butler's a super athletic safety from Louisiana. Sam Howell is maybe the best value pick that they had. He may be their starter of the future, and they got him to pick 144. So that's good job there. Cole Turner is a super smooth, like silky smooth tight end, not a great blocker, but runs routes well, has a good sense of where to sit down and get zone coverage, terrific hands, and I think he could become sort of a Chad Lewis type, or Dennis Pitta, I guess, sort of could be his ceiling. And I really like this pick. Chris Paul is a player that I think John Matsko, he's their 71-year-old offensive line coach. He's a football lifer, obviously. He's coached all over the place in both college and the NFL. Coached with Rivera before when they were with the Panthers in the past. But he's going to find a lot of things he likes in Chris Paul, who I think can play a couple of different positions at a high level. Very aggressive, very athletic, and I think, the sky's the limit on him. And they finish up with Christian Holmes, who's a athletic-ish, 4.52, decent numbers and fairly productive, but I think he's once again sort of a depth piece, which is fine, a special teamer, which is fine at pick 240. So they have, I would say, 3 really strong value picks with pick 144, 149, and 230. A couple of slight reaches at 47 and 98, and then about right value with Percy Butler and about the right value with Jahan Dotson, though I'm not utterly convinced they couldn't have traded back and still gotten him. And I like Jahan Dotson. Like I have him in my top 5 amongst the wide receiver class, or no, just outside of my top 5. Scratch that. Just outside of the top 5 in my wide receiver class, but he's a good player, a very good player. So just walking through their undrafted free agent signing class, which I think is has at least a couple players in it that I think will end up contributing, and some of them will probably contribute soon. So some of the players that I think have a really good chance to make the team. Now, they're not going to carry, obviously, more than 3 quarterbacks active. I mean, but in Cole Kelly, and shout out to my old friend and Steelers Fury maven and just a terrific human being, Will Mathis, who is essentially the draft Twitter uncle of Cole Kelly. And Cole Kelly, of course, Southeast Louisiana quarterback, big man with a big arm, started his career as sort of a Ryan Mallett type, right? Slightly more athletic, but Ryan Mallett type at Arkansas, and then got in a little trouble, transfers to Southeast Louisiana, and rewrites the record book at SELA. Big arm, big guy, reasonably accurate, though not a tack driver. Like, things he can work on in terms of accuracy and keeping his upper body and lower body married together, for like way of putting it. I love them getting Jacquez Ezzard as an undrafted free agent. That's a guy that I think should have been drafted probably in the 6th round or so. Curtis Hodges is another supersized tight end type, and he might maybe stick as a blocking tight end. Jacob Panusiak is a guy that I don't understand why he wasn't drafted. Well, I mean, he didn't test super well. The other 2 guys I think they have a legitimate chance to make the team are Devin Taylor, the Bowling Green by way of William & Mary by way of Illinois State to complete the double play. Corner, who once again is a guy that has been fairly productive and is decent athlete and has good size at the position. And then the other guy I think has a legitimate chance of making of the undrafted free agent signing class is Tyreese Robinson, the guard, center, interior offensive lineman who has, once again, not great testing numbers, and that's probably why he was an undrafted free agent, but his tape is solid enough, and I think he's a rotational piece. Back to Mr. Cole Kelly, who I think ends up on their practice squad. So he's the most highly rated, at least, actually Ezzard is the most highly rated, but the most interesting is Cole Kelly. So he's 6'7", 249 pounds, slimmed down to get to that. He was down near 260 at one point. And I'll quote, since I've been trying to work in my various draft Twitter buddies into this year, I'll quote Thor Nystrom. And Thor is one of the really great follows out there. So if you're not following him and you're really into football, follow Thor Nystrom, which I think is just at Thor Nystrom. I think it's very simple. But here's his in quotes. The NFL never warmed up to Cole Kelly. Coming off a pair of incredible seasons in the FCS and after having transferred down from Arkansas, Kelly is a jumbo-sized quarterback with a short yardage battering ram running chops. He doesn't have a big arm. I would accurately, he has an above average arm is probably what I would say. But back to Thor. He doesn't have a big arm, but he's accurate, short, and intermediate. Kelly wouldn't seem to have a great shot of cracking this roster. He enters camp behind Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, and Sam Howell, but may latch on elsewhere if he shows something in the preseason. If not, Washington is assuredly earmarking one of its practice squad spots for his development. I'll mention also a Canadian player that's very interesting. And I've been trying to mention more Canadian players. I've always liked CIF, Canadian Intercollegiate Football. The only issue is resources, and when I say coaching, I don't mean like the coaching isn't good. They have so few paid slots on their coaching staff. Some of these teams literally have 1, 2, 3 paid coaches, so the coaching is just scarce. But Deionte Knight from Western in Canada is listed at 6'4", 275. He's probably legitimately 6'3" and 1/4 and 262, 263. But he had 52 tackles, 13 tackles lost, and 10 sacks, forced 2 fumbles in his last season at Western University, helping the Mustangs to win the Vanier Cup. And he's from Ajax, Ontario. He also won the JP Metras Trophy, which is sort of like the Outland, sort of. I mean, it's their most outstanding down lineman trophy in university college football up there. And in his collegiate career up there, he had 96 tackles, 13.5 sacks. So he's a guy who's really produced. I can probably find out what he did at the Canadian Combine. I don't have it right in front of me. But let's dig a little bit into their cap situation. And obviously, they have a little bit of dead money tied up, but not a huge amount. I mean, a little over $2.5 million. So that's right. That's what you want. Matt Ioannidis is $1.5 million of it right off the top. Then $250,000 for Josiah Elliott. Antonio Gandy Golden, former draft Twitter darling of some, $247,200. Wes Martin, $162,702. And then Keith Ishmael, $159,918. Most of their cap is tied up in terms of this year's cap numbers in a couple players. $295,118 million is tied up in Carson Wentz. He's obviously their biggest expenditure. Then comes Landon Collins, who has no guaranteed salary money, but a fair amount of prorated bonus and a base salary that's decent sized should he not get cut. Should he get cut, it's still $11 million plus against the cap. But he's a $15,707,353 million cap number this year. William Jackson III is $13,812,500 against the cap. And then Curtis Samuel, who at some point maybe should get another deal if he can stay healthy, has $10 million in guaranteed salary, but is a cap hit of $12,625,000. Then comes Kendall Fuller. Once again, no guaranteed salary, but has a cap number of $11,125,000. And then Chase Roulier, of all people, right? He's right there next. At $980,000 against the cap, and then I'll give you the last two. Jonathan Allen's $9.5 million against the cap, and then Chase Young is $9,426,436 against the cap. You know what? I'll give you a bonus one. Bonus two. Daron Payne is $8,529,000 against the cap, and then last but not least, I'll give you Charles Leno, who is $8.5 million against the cap. So there's really, with the exception of the top two I mentioned, particularly Wentz, most of the cap numbers are not ridiculous, not crazy. They're slightly more weighted towards offense and defense, which, is sort of a surprising thing about how good the defense is and how the offense is. But a little over $121 million of their $237,149,899 they currently have expended. $121 million, so yeah, over half is going towards offense. And I think that they're going to continue to try to build the offense. I think they feel good about their defense, and a lot of those guys are still fairly inexpensive, as I mentioned before, real bargains. They're going to have to redo Chase Young sometime in the fairly near future and a few other deals, but most of their situation is very tenable. So things look pretty good for at least the immediate future, in terms of managing the cap. So this is a team that has some decisions to make. For Carson Wentz, this is the very definition of a make or break year. Not only for his time in Washington, but probably for his time as a starter in the NFL. If he has a terrific season, or even an above average season, let's say 3,600 passing yards, let's say 28 touchdowns, so let's say 8 interceptions, and throws in another 600 yards rushing, but the team wins 10, 11 games, which could be doable. It would probably be enough for them to win the East. The NFC East is not exactly a murderer's row. One, that reestablishes him, and obviously it puts this team in a position to push itself not into the playoffs, but change the way they're perceived in the eyes of free agents. And clearly they have a little over almost 700 and they have about $736,585 currently available that they haven't expended amongst available cap space, and they're going to need more of that to land some of the free agents I think they will land in the future. But so much is still swirling around the franchise. I mean, they've recently changed their name, and it's not really gone well in terms of how it's been perceived publicly. They obviously have one of the worst owners in the NFL, if not the worst. There's still some things that have to be worked out for this franchise, but the football part of the Washington Commanders, it looks like the arrow's pointing in the right way. And obviously what happens with Carson Wentz and staying healthy at some key positions will decide just how far this team goes. But we will move on, and I'll be talking about the next team next.